This Honorable Criminal Court is now open pursuant to adjournment. Honorable Judge James Duggan presiding over the 2nd Judicial District. Please be seated.
The first case we'll take up today is C versus Megan Boswell, S72869. I guess the easiest thing to take up first would be the proposed jury questionnaires.
Your Honor, I think we have proposed a jury questionnaire, and we made some revisions that I think you originally proposed one, and we had a few revisions that we tendered to you. And I think Mr. Sproul is probably in agreement with our final version of the questionnaire. Is that correct?
The one that I approve is after your changes, correct?
Correct.
And yes, we're in agreement with that form.
Your Honor, we would recommend that be approved, and the other request that we would have with the state that it would either not be disseminated other than to the lawyers this time, either it's be filed under seal, but if not, there'd be instruction not to disseminate it, because we don't want that to be previewed before you have a jury pick, because as you know, generally the court wants the jurors to be candid and to be under supervision of the court and sworn to at the time of concluded. If it's disseminated, it would give the opportunity maybe to potential jurors to look at the form and formulate answers or have somebody assist them beforehand. So that would be our request.
But cases in the past, I don't know that it's actually been done.
I don't think it has been. I just think in this case that we would just ask the court to request for counsel.
I think we need to send a copy of it to Mr. Russell so that he can make the copies when we get ready for the trial.
We'll do that.
All right. Next up is the defendant's motion for severance.
Judge, on that, I've had the opportunity to review the state's response to our motion, and I think we're probably in agreement, Your Honor, that the evaluation the court needs to do is essentially the same as a Rule 404B evaluation. The first determination is whether that is part of a common scheme or plan, and both our motion and the response state the standards that the court is to look at in that response or that regard. And the state makes a compelling argument in their response. I'm not prepared to concede that position, but I can certainly see where their argument comes from. It appears to me, Your Honor, that the crux of this motion and the argument here where we disagree is whether the prejudicial effect of these additional charges outweighs its probative value. And what we have asked the court to do is sever counts 1 through 4 from all the remaining counts, and essentially to have 2 separate trials. And our position, Judge, is that to try all these together, especially the multiple counts of filing false report, essentially gives the jury the option in their processing to say, well, she's guilty of these crimes, the false reports, so therefore she must be guilty of the felony murder the aggravated child abuse and aggravated child neglect without evaluating the elements of each of those offenses. And so we are asking the court to sever those counts. In the state's response, on page 5 of that, they make the statement that at their core, the false reports prove the murder. And I think that is the whole problem here, Judge. If the state wants to present evidence of the false reports during the murder trial, I don't think that's the issue. The issue is the fact that she's charged with the same crimes. I'm not explaining that well. What I mean, Judge, is that it's a different evaluation for the jury to say that she is convicted of, or she is charged with multiple counts of filing a false report. Therefore, she must be guilty of these other charges. That's different than saying, than the state presenting the evidence of those false reports in the charge of the felony murder case. And that, I think, is appropriate. I don't think I can argue that it's not. What I'm saying is that if the jury evaluates that, and they determine that there is sufficient evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to prove the elements, then that's what it is. But it's not appropriate if they say she is guilty of filing a false report. Don't even look at the elements of the other cases and convict her based on that. That's what we're trying to avoid by this motion, Your Honor, is to take that possibility away from the jury. That they can say, the state proved she's guilty of filing a false report. Therefore, she's got to be guilty of these other things. And I think that, the state's response pretty much points that out, that is the situation. So that's why we're asking for a severance of those counts.
Judge, the state's filed our response to Mr. Sproul's motion. I believe under the case law, the state's required little evidence for this court to.
You want to ask before you got too far into it?
Yes. So I'm not going to. I'm not really going to respond to Mr. Sproul's arguments yet. I've stated at this point I'd like to go ahead and put on evidence in regards to the severance of the hearing.
Absolutely.
All right. So the state would call Special Agent David Gratz.
State your name. Very great. Solemnly swear affirm testimony about to give you the truth, the whole truth, and the truth, sir. Awesome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You are Special Agent David Gratz, is that correct?
That's correct.
And who are you currently employed with?
The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
And what is your position or assignment there with the TBI?
I'm a special agent assigned to the Criminal Investigation Division.
And how long have you been with the TBI?
About 2.5 years.
What did you do before you joined the TBI?
I was an assistant district attorney for about 5 years.
And where were you maybe at?
In the 3rd Judicial District.
And how long did you do that?
About 5 years.
Agent Gratz, if we could, I want to go back to February of 2020. Were you called out to assist the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office on an investigation that involved a 15-month-old child by the name of Emily Boswell?
Yes, I was.
And at that time, the initial report that got everything started really wasn't a call to law enforcement. Initially, it was a call to the Department of Children's Services that was made on February the 18th. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And who was it that made that initial call?
It was actually the child's of Evelyn's paternal grandfather, Tommy Boswell, and also his mother, Mary Boswell.
All right. And let's kind of set the stage here a little bit by identifying some of the parties. You mentioned the biological grandfather who made the call. That was Tommy Boswell, correct?
Yes.
And what is his relation to the defendant, Megan Boswell?
That's her father.
Okay. And then the child, that is Evelyn Boswell, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What was without getting into too many of the facts, what was the nature of that initial call to DCS?
It was essentially two-pronged. It was, number one, they hadn't seen the child in quite some time. There was also sort of a rumor or a belief that the child may have a broken arm.
Okay. So, as you mentioned, there was a possibility of potential injury to the child. So the sheriff's office had gone along to assist DCS because of the possibility there might be some potential child abuse there. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. When the sheriff's office and DCS got there to investigate, was Evelyn present so that they could evaluate, see the child, see whether she had any injuries?
No.
What was the explanation, or I guess the story that was given by Megan Boswell at that time as to where her child was?
Megan stated the child, Evelyn, was with her father, who she stated was Ethan Perry.
And did she say where Mr. Perry was at that time?
She, if I remember correctly, she sort of speculated that he might have been in Louisiana, but he also might be living in Kingsport.
Were you all able to locate Mr. Perry?
Not at the time, no.
Through further investigation, did you find out where Mr. Perry was?
Yes.
Okay, and where was he?
He was active duty military stationed in Louisiana.
All right. And did you all make contact with the folks down in Louisiana?
Yes.
And was Mr. Perry, in fact, at that Army base in Louisiana?
Yes.
Was Evelyn there with him?
No.
Okay. So you all were able to pretty quickly prove that the information that Ms. Boswell had given you about the location of the child was not correct. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, after that initial report, over the next few days, did you, along with other investigators and officers, conduct a series of interviews with the defendant, Megan Boswell?
Yes.
All right. And what were the nature of those interviews? What were y'all talking about?
We were trying to locate Evelyn Boswell.
All right. And after speaking with her, and you spoke with her on multiple occasions, would that be correct?
Yes.
All right. What did you determine about the information that Megan was giving you?
It was false.
And as a result of that, on February 25th of 2020, the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office charged Megan Boswell with one count of false report. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was for the information that she gave to them initially back on February the 18th of 2020. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. Agent Kratz, if you could, I'm going to hand you a document asking if you can identify it. Do you recognize what's been handed to you?
Yes.
What is it?
It's a certified copy of the general session report.
Okay. Was that the affidavit of complaint that was filed on February 25th, 2020, charging Megan Boswell with that one count of false report?
Yes.
Judge, we would move to make that Exhibit 1 to this hearing.
No objection, Judge. All right. Be full Exhibit 1. For marking and effective.
Agent Kratz, at this time, there were no charges that had been placed regarding any sort of child abuse or murder. Is that right?
That's correct.
Because, in fact, at that point in time, on February 25th, you still didn't know where Evelyn was.
That's correct.
But your investigation did not end on February 25th.
No.
All right. In fact, there were. Tell the court. I mean, besides the TBI, what other agencies were investigating Megan's disappearance or Evelyn's disappearance? Sorry.
The initial investigating agencies would have been DCS and the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office. Later in the evening on February 18th, Special Agent Brian Pritchard was called in to assist Sullivan County Sheriff's Office. I was called in the next day to assist. And by the time I arrived, around noon, I believe on the 19th, the Sheriff's Office, TBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, was also present.
And in addition, your investigation, you all were interviewing witnesses.
Yes.
Is that right? You all wrote search warrants for social media accounts.
Yes.
Is that right? You all, as part of your investigation, collected numerous cell phones, items of digital evidence that had to be reviewed, correct?
Yes.
All right. And what kind of volume are we talking about here? I mean, how much evidence were you all looking for?
If I remember correctly, it was close to a terabyte of everything we collected.
All right. And your investigation continued up in time, and then on March the 6th, 2020, something happened, correct?
Yes.
And what was it that occurred on March the 6th?
We discovered the remains of Evelyn Boswell.
All right. And where were those located?
At Tommy Boswell's property on Muddy Creek Road.
Okay. And was that a location that you all, based on your investigation, were able to tie specifically to the defendant, Megan Boswell?
Absolutely. The property itself is where the defendant used to live.
Okay. And was there anything of significance about the exact location that the body was found?
Yes.
Okay. What was that?
We found the remains inside of a building that was referred to by the family as the Playhouse. It was out behind what I would call a storage building on the property, and this Playhouse was built by defendant Megan's grandfather as a playhouse for her when she was a child.
Now, after you all located the body, it was sent for an autopsy, is that right?
Yes.
Did you all collect other evidence there at the scene?
Yes.
And there, as a result of collecting that evidence, it was sent off to have forensic examination done. Is that right?
Yes.
Performing all that testing takes a pretty good period of time. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. And while all that was going on, you then presented to the grand jury at a presentment charging Megan Boswell with 11 counts of false report. Is that right?
Yes.
And that was done on May the 20th of 2020.
Yes.
Is that right? And Agent Graff, I'm going to hand you another document and ask you if you can identify what's being handed to you.
Yes.
You recognize that?
Yes, it's a certified copy of the presentment from May the 20th of 2020.
All right. Judge, at this time, we have to make that exhibit 2 to this hearing.
Judge, we don't object. That's in the court file.
All right.
Me too.
Agent Graff, once I guess it was several months later, you got the final autopsy report. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you also received the results of the forensic testing that was done at the TBI lab.
Yes.
All right. And after that was completed, did you then re-present this matter to the Sullivan County Grand Jury.
Yes,
And that was done on August the 19th of 2020. Is that right?
that's correct.
Okay. And this time I'm going to hand you another document, Matthew, you can identify that.
Yes, it's the certified copy of the presentment from August 19th, 2020.
All right. Judge, could I would move to make that exhibit number 3 to this hearing?
You just, full exhibit.
Agent Gratz, that superseding presentment, that is the presentment that charges 2 counts of felony murder, the aggravated child abuse, aggravated child neglect, tampering with evidence, 12 counts of false report, abuse of a corpse, and failure to report a death under suspicious circumstances. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, based on your investigation, which by the time August rolls around, had been going on for several months, correct?
Correct.
Were you able to determine when the defendant had begun telling this false information about where the victim was located?
Yes.
And what did you determine about that?
Based on everything we've collected, the first, time we found the defendant told the story that Evelyn was with Ethan was during the first week of December of 2019.
And what sorts of things told you this? What was the evidence you were looking at that gave you the clue she was?
Text messages, witness statements.
And so this was happening back in December of 2019,
Yes.
right? So this was several months before law enforcement ever even got involved.
That's correct.
Correct. If we could, Agent Gratz, I'm going to, could we pass exhibit number 3 back to him? What I'd like to do, if you could turn to count 6, which is the first false report count, what I'd like to do is kind of go through those and talk about the dates that they were made, who they were made to, and what the substance of that false report was, so we can kind of get that on the record. And we'll start with count 6. That was made on February the 18th of 2020. Statement made to Detective Tracy Carraz with the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office. What was the false report related to that account?
It was when the defendant, Megan Boswell, claimed that Evelyn was with Ethan Perry.
So it was a false statement related to who had custody of the child.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if we could, count 7, again, on February the 18th of 2020, a statement made to Detectives Michelle Gillum and Tracy Carraz, both with the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office. What was the false statement related to that count?
I believe this was later in the day or evening on the 18th, and this was concerning the lack of knowledge of the whereabouts of Evelyn and the efforts that the defendant had taken to locate Evelyn.
So that would relate to false report of where the child was, correct?
Correct.
Count 8, again on February the 18th of 2020, false statement report to Steve Williams, detective with the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office. And what was the nature of that false report?
This was the statement where the defendant discussed Ethan Perry refusing to return text messages and voicemails regarding Evelyn.
Okay. So again, that's a false report regarding someone else having custody of Evelyn, correct?
Yes.
Count 9, another false report made on February 18th of 2020 to Captain Joey Strickler with the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office. What was the nature of that report?
This was about the last physical contact she had with Evelyn and the lack of knowledge of the whereabouts of Evelyn.
Okay. So that one deals with more of the time frame when she last had contact with the child, correct?
Yes.
Count 10, a report made on February the 19th to agents with the FBI, Jeff Blanton and Todd Wilcox. What was the nature of it?
This was her discussing, her being Megan Boswell, the time frame in which she stated she gave Evelyn to Ethan Perry.
All right. Count 11, report made on February the 20th of 2020. Again, to Captain Strickler with the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office. What was the nature of that report?
This is when the defendant stated when she last saw Evelyn was with Ethan Perry on December the 26th of 2019, and she had not contacted law enforcement on the advice of her mother, Angela.
All right, so Angela Boswell, just clear on the record, that is Megan Boswell's mother, correct?
Yes.
So this report has to deal with two things. One, the time frame in which she claimed she last saw the child, as well as implicating someone else in the disappearance and the fact that they could not locate the child, correct?
Yes.
Count 12, another report made on February the 20th of 2020, to you as well as Detective Matt Price with the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office. What was the nature of that false report?
This was when the defendant stated her mother, Angela Boswell, had Evelyn Boswell.
And so again, she's implicated someone else in the disappearance of her child, correct?
Yes.
Count 13, again on February the 20th of 2020, report made to yourself as well as Detective Matt Price. What was the nature of that report?
This is when she stated that her mother, Angela Boswell, had Evelyn since mid-December, and that Angela refused to tell the defendant her location, Evelyn's location, and she didn't call the police because she was afraid, the defendant was afraid that Angela would harm Evelyn.
Okay. So